Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to our chat today. We are here live to all of you with Victoria Wales with USAGov. Victoria is a digital strategist at USAGov, which is part of the GSA. She's a digital strategist and specifically works on like marketing and outreach. And Victoria has been working with FEMA for a little over the last 3 months, responding to the disaster is in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria. So Victoria is finishing up her tour of duty down in Puerto Rico, and so we thought we'd get some insight into what it's like to manage and kind of build out the communications around a disaster and what this has been like. So hello, Victoria.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is such a unique opportunity to be able to talk to you from Puerto Rico while I'm still here. I'm here actually at the Joint Field Office, and I'll give you guys a really quick tour around the office. But I'm right now at the Joint Field Office. This is an office that was started here in response for Hurricane Maria. We have over something like 1,300 employees here responding just here, what would be like the headquarters. It's quite a massive operation. And I am actually part of external affairs for the digital comms team. This is part of the SF Emergency Support Function 15, which is a standard operating procedures. And basically what FEMA does is provides accurate and life-saving information during major incidents, which is sort of the highest priority when responding to a disaster. And their primary guidance or function is to give out consistent public information through an integrated federal incident communication system. And what that means is that they coordinate all the information that is going to come out of the federal government, all the federal agencies, in a way that's consistent and helpful to the public in times of emergencies and responding to disasters.
So how many federal agencies are there with you right now, like in that space?
All of them have a role, depending on where the disaster is. Each one, even GSA has been here, of course, supporting different functions, such as a lot of the travel and transportation needs that that employees have here. EPA has been here, CDC, HHS, all coordinating the federal response here in Puerto Rico. So all of them, the FBI, of course, many agencies from DHS, Customs and Border Protection, doing different functions from actually commodity distribution. The Coast Guard was here, the Army. So a number of different federal agencies, quite a lot. It's a tremendous effort. It's one of the most astounding things I've had the benefit and the opportunity to experience. It is a massive effort, coordinating the entire federal response to a disaster, really in another part of the country has had its own challenges, both from a geographic standpoint, but also from sort of a language, cultural aspect as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Hurricane Maria happened on September 20th, or
That's right.
Came by around September 20th. But that's also within like the span of like there was Hurricane Harvey, there were the wildfires out in California, and then following that there was Irma. So can you talk a little bit about just like what is USAGov's role in like helping all of this? I mean, everybody's very familiar with FEMA, or more familiar with FEMA, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's so interesting because given my experience here, I was like, wow, we have so many parallels in the sense that USAGov serves as a guide to information and services. We coordinate all of the information, public information for the federal government. And we also support a lot of disaster response, especially when they're large scale, and particularly because USAGov and Gobierno USA.gov, its sister Spanish site and function, we respond to disasters because we are also designated by the Department of Homeland Security as the federal government's official communication channel for emergencies. We have a call center that fields a lot of questions. and response to these kinds of disasters too. And in particular, in this disaster, because it was one of the last ones, and FEMA was tasked with responding to so many, the agency became stretched very thin in terms of personnel. They activated all of their reservists, which is also a really fascinating program that I could even talk about that I find very interesting. And they also asked, they did a call out to other agencies, and in emergencies like this, other agencies are part of this effort. I think one of the things that people misunderstand a lot about is what FEMA's actual role is in disaster response. They're a coordinating agency, kind of a lot like USAGov coordinates information. And so we have been active participants in NICL calls, which have taken place over many, many years, which is the National Incident Communications Conference line, where several agencies report out, what they're doing in that particular response, whatever emergency is taking place. And yeah, there was a big call out for bilingual professionals to come help in Puerto Rico, because the language and cultural needs were very large scale, and there wasn't enough personnel to cover a lot of the different tasks that needed to get done here in the response effort and the recovery effort that we're seeing now.
So can you? I'm sure it's changed a lot from from when you arrived there, but can you talk a little bit about the day-to-day and kind of what the intake looks like and the flow, and how the team is responding to that, and what that looks like?
Yeah, it's remarkable to have. This is now my second deployment, and when I started with FEMA, I had reported to headquarters and actually helped their LEP program, which is the Limited English Proficiency Program. They needed a lot of help with Spanish language translations, so I supported that program. And then people were sort of deploying left and right, and they asked me if I would be interested, and I said, sure, I can go and support. I came to support the external affairs team, especially digital communications team, and they were really building a team from the ground up, because their team members from their digital comms teams, they were focused on the other disasters too. So we had a couple of reservists and some other surge capacity folks from other agencies start to build an actual team. And we started with a Facebook page that began. And there were two Facebook pages, actually. It was one in English and one in Spanish, to address, all the different things that we wanted to communicate to survivors. And after about a couple of days or so, we were thinking about the strategy and thought, we really don't need two pages. We should combine them and have it be a bilingual page, even though a lot of people in Puerto Rico speak English. The native language is actually Spanish. So we need to, serve that survivor first. And, it was challenging, because when I first started here back in October, I started on October 9th, communications were very bad. They were very spotty. My Wi-Fi was terrible. Everybody's Wi-Fi was terrible at the Joint Field Office, the JFO. I was posting things on Facebook, from, my cell connection, next door, trying to get, whatever service that I could. And then also imagine that a lot of people couldn't open web pages. So we had to rethink the strategy of how to put really important, emergency information into a graphic, so people could take that information, those who did have connectivity, be able to access that, right? And then we were given a lot of visual media. It was really incredible. I feel so incredibly humbled and fortunate to have worked with not only people who had tremendous amount of experience in disaster response, who then came, and supported the digital team, and who have told me that this was the worst disaster they had ever worked in. This was someone who actually this was their 15th disaster, and they said the one in Puerto Rico has been the most complex, the most difficult to deal with for just a variety of reasons, from geographic to, a lot of the things that affected, the infrastructure even before the two hurricanes hit. So we employed a couple of different strategies to figure out, we're the digital team, so we have to communicate in a digital manner, but what were some other things we could do in order to get the word out about important information that FEMA wanted to announce or publish. And so we did a text messaging campaign, a bilingual one, which is still running. We also, posted on Twitter. We also repurposed a lot of our content and put it in broadcast content. So a lot of radio stations could pick that up because we knew a lot of people had access to radio. So even though one of the really neat things, and I've learned a lot at FEMA, and I would imagine it would take years to learn so much more, but is about being flexible and being creative with what you have. A response like this sort of requires for you to think a little bit outside the box and talk to different people all the time and say, okay, well, you know, what do you have for footage for this, and what can we show about this, and you know, what are the biggest needs? And one of the biggest things I think that we really serve survivors with here is when people began to access more of our channels and asked us questions, we could actually, you know, answer them and direct them. Also, kind of my experience with USAGov, which is to guide people to their next best step. That's what we would do, right? We would say, okay, please go here. And then eventually when disaster recovery centers open, we would guide them there. And then, you know, sort of on our last point, no day was the same. I had days where we would get incredible footage of commodities being airlifted, you know, to remote areas, because some of the things that people don't understand is the topography of Puerto Rico is quite complex too. It's very mountainous. When the hurricane hit, everything was devastated. Roads were all trashed. There was no access. It's very difficult to get actual commodities and supplies to people. So, you know, the Coast Guard would, you know, bring us some of this footage and say, you know, this is what we encountered, you know, and how do we communicate where people can get, you know, some supplies. People would ask us, you know, we have this emergency here, and then we would report it right to the correct point of contact to see if they can look into that particular issue. So I felt a little bit like a first responder sometimes, and the immensity of it all, right? With that kind of responsibility to do a good job and make sure we were going to the right people for those kinds of situations.
I'm kind of interested in knowing, like, as a team, as a communications team, like, how do you know in that type of environment, how do you know what type of connectivity people have? Like, what was your input like to then obviously give you the tools to then generate the output?
So analytics, we still looked a lot of at our data and saw like what areas of Puerto Rico our content was being accessed from. So of course it made a lot of sense, right? Some were sort of the areas that had the most connectivity, and some of the ones we didn't even realize had as much connectivity were accessing our information. There are 78 municipalities in Puerto Rico, so we usually broke down all of our data that way. That's how we knew, you know, from which areas were some of that information was being shared. We also know influencers would very much share our information, which was helpful because we knew those were good channels to go through. And in fact, you know, going back to USAGov, that was a big part of what we were doing from the beginning when we put up 2 pages on Hurricane Maria. Information, both location from people inside Puerto Rico and people out of Puerto Rico who might need to access that information and inform their families. So the strategy was also for us at USAGov was to be able to help people outside of the United States with information for them to inform their families, you know, when they would have connectivity, or give them information that would help them get to the next best step until those people were able to get connected, which did take a while. So we knew that. And then we also had some good data from our text messaging campaign and who was subscribing, and we saw those numbers continue to increase. So we knew that people were slowly connecting more and more. So from the beginning, when there was really not a lot of connectivity into like late October, November, that was starting to change.
Were there places where communication or information sharing was happening that was sort of outside in other pockets that you noticed, or that you went into those spaces? And if so, could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, there was an app called Zello that was doing some crowdsourcing on a volunteer basis. And, you know, one of the things that I talk a lot about when I talk about my work here was how important it is to have sort of in-language cultural appreciation for what resonates here, right? Because they were really interested to get some information out to Puerto Ricans about, you know, from clean water information to, you know, power and all sorts of things, but also making the connection of where people could find these resources and what was accurate. So there were a lot of different pockets of where information was shared. It was challenging. I think it's been challenging. There's still, I think, some pockets of the island that are still not receiving as much information because they, either don't have as much connectivity, or they're getting more sort of paperwork. So sort of the more old-fashioned, word of mouth, but also actual paper products of information has been how they're filling that gap. And then, of course, the multiple disaster recovery centers, which I think they're up to like 45 that have been opened across the island, have been just absolutely critical in assisting survivors, but also informing them of, kind of what are their next best steps and qualify for and so forth.
Are you also pushing information out to kind of other areas for then them to pass that information on? Are you training the trainers in some ways as well?
Absolutely. There are branches across the island that are now responsible for their areas and their zones. The Joint Information Center, which is where I am and what I support, sort of drives a lot of that communication. But of course, it's I can't even underestimate the immensity of the communications effort, the reports that I read on a daily basis. And we have to, understand not only from like what's going on in the disaster, what are some of the updates, but also all the liaisons, what are they on, placed under different, program areas. So like there's some that are responsible for water and power and mitigation and emergency services. And they all put together these reports. Also, there's a program called the Intergovernmental Affairs where they work directly with the municipalities to troubleshoot some of the issues that are taking place with the response. If they have a particular need, how they can help bridge that need or that gap. So there's a lot of different pieces to the recovery of a place that was hit so hard.
I know I asked this question because I know this is actually a kind of a difficult thing in government, but what tools are you using to do this? Like I imagine like sending coordinated documents out to other kind of remote sort of satellite places. Like is it just simply email? Are you using like Google Docs? How is this information coming in?
Google Docs would be a dream. There are a lot of different mechanisms. I mean, some of them are the more traditional mediums of meetings and calls. They have a very cool system. I think FEMA, they call it a battle rhythm, and every day they send out sort of a schedule of all the different calls that are going to take place in programs. And there's like it's kind of like a mission assignment of everything that's going to take place that day in terms of coordination, collaboration. A lot of email, of course, happens. I imagine that there are a lot of video calls and things that will happen. There aren't, as far as I know, more ways in terms of like Google Docs or anything like that. Isn't something that DHS uses. But internally, my digital communications team, which is this sort of fraction of this overall response, does use SharePoint. Which is really great. They've been able to share a lot of their own, and as we train up, right? Because the team that came, the original team that came, some of them who were temporary, some who were reservists, some who were here to help build the team. Like we were here to just, start all the efforts to, give a little bit more life to the Twitter account, the Facebook accounts, the Instagram account, all of these different channels that we were using, and then train up the actual people that were hired in Puerto Rico to work here at FEMA and then take that to the next level. So I imagine that as this continues and as connectivity continues, there will be less need for that type of coordination. But that's all I can think of at the moment that is being used.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about just like how big your team is, and then also just like when do you start your day, or when have you started your day? What is your own battle rhythm kind of for the day?
So it's really changed. When I first started, the days were from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and very often they were about 6:30 a.m. earlier to 9 p.m. because there was just that much work. They started back in October with it was flood of reports, and this is the issues and need to communicate this. And it was kind of a little bit like content curation. So we would choose every day. We'd say, okay, these are like the 3 or 5 posts that we're going to put up on Facebook that are maybe the most important, showing a little bit of, you know, what the federal government is doing and responding to, but also very much focus, right? Here's how you can access this. Here's how you can apply for disaster assistance. Here are the steps. This is what you should know in preparation for asking for assistance and so forth, right? So every day was a little bit different, but it sort of started with us having our own little battle rhythm and our huddle, and the team got very close. We would start with, you know, a fact about our, you know, ourselves, like what do we like to eat, what's our favorite food or ice cream or whatever. And it was a great way to bond because it was so stressful that I think it was a great way to break the ice with all of us. We didn't know each other. We became a family because we were sort of pushed together in this team, you know, having to work with each other, which was excellent. I've worked with the most remarkable people of my professional life who were just in it to, you know, very mission focused and are like, okay, I can take this, you can take that. And there was really no room for wanting to negotiate. I didn't even experience that. People just took on the task and would own it and would run with it and learn as they went, right? Because it was a lot of information to be thrown our way every day. So we had that battle rhythm. We'd start, you know, posting some things, you know, people would come to me every day, like every 20 minutes. Oh, I have this new video and I have this photo, and we did this drop off, and it was like combat camera guys who were like, I need to meet with you to talk about the story we need to shoot. I mean, it was fascinating, and it was very fast paced. That was more in the response period of time. Now in the recovery, we can plan out a little bit better what we're going to be shooting, you know, why, what are some priorities, but it's still very, very fast paced. And then every day, not only do we publish a lot of content, but we give out a lot of reports of what we've published, what have been sort of the reactions, the top questions that people have had, troubleshooting areas, and all of our metrics. And then we do like a weekly report too. There's a lot of reporting at FEMA. So and we do a big, one of the biggest programs that the digital team is responsible for is social listening, which is a very, very, very cool, I think, part of the strategy for digital communications, where you're really understanding and learning the tone and what people are saying, both by, you know, about FEMA, but really what are some of the survivors' needs, and prioritizing those and reporting those up. And it's a very sort of integrated way for how we inform the content strategy, and how we also measure successes of what we're doing, but also what are some of the gap areas. And if anybody wants to learn more about some of those digital strategies, I very much encourage you to reach out to the digital team at FEMA.
I feel like we could spend a lot of time just talking about social listening. It's just there's so much there that I'd like to unpack. But I want to ask you about the your role is also a little bit to train up a team in Puerto Rico to stay on and kind of continue the role of recovery. Can you talk a little bit about that and its sort of relationship to federal, state, local government, and kind of what's happening there?
Sure. Yeah. So we, even from the beginning, we've worked with the local governments here. It's again going back to what FEMA's mission is, right? We're a supporting agency for the federal effort, and we support states, you know, in this case, the territory, with their emergency response. And we're here at the petition of the governor. So we work with those entities to, you know, help with this response, right? So we coordinate everything through them. We had a lot of press conferences in the past too to address our response. We still do when dignitaries come and Congress comes, the CODELs come and you know, assess kind of the recovery. So we do work with a lot of those entities. And then as far as the actual team here, it's been amazing. We have a great mix of very experienced folks who come from all kinds of walks of life in terms of, you know, their professional experiences, their marketers, their digital strategists for, you know, they've been for brands, also from news channels, and it's amazing to tell them, you know, more about how the federal government works and how eager they've been to learn, you know, how to take all of this on, and they're running with everything now, from, you know, the day-to-day, but also kind of moving the strategy too. They're running their own Facebook Lives. That was a big part of our digital strategy too. and working with influencers to kind of amplify those and talk about topics. And in fact, we're going to have one, I believe, on Thursday that will be very interesting on power restoration. So tune in for that. I think it's very educational. You learn every day so much about, what all this effort is. It's a lot. So I know that they're going to do an amazing job, and, nothing like having people also from where you are. That cultural element is just so critical. When I first started here, I was really needing, even though I'm Hispanic, I speak Spanish, I know a lot about Puerto Rican culture. I was really, really hungry for some support from locals so that we could really get our messaging right, because we're here to support them, and it's about their recovery, and we need to have their buy-in now. So it's a beautiful thing to look around, and I have to stress this again, and see all these faces and all these people, and it's almost difficult to put into words just how big this is and how many local people are here. I think it's now close to 1,000 that are they're all local hires. They're all from Puerto Rico, now helping the federal response.
That is absolutely amazing. And so you fly back tomorrow, and you come back, and I'm kind of curious, so you've been immersed over there, and there's so much has happened. What are you looking forward to bringing back from this experience and applying to the rest of government, or at least just to USAGov?
I have to say I couldn't have done it without my team or the experience that I have at USAGov. And that's not because they're going to have me back soon, so I'm trying to perk them up over there or anything. But truly, we are a team that is constantly kind of, I don't want to use the word forced, but having challenged, I guess, to support other agencies. Like, we've supported the Department of Justice, the Social Security Administration on all kinds of topics. So we're not the subject matter experts, but we are very much quick learners and support other agencies with digital strategies. That's part of our mission. And this was by far the most challenging, the most humbling that I've had. I've worked with a tremendous amount of great people that have taught me a whole lot. I will probably bring, I thought I was pretty fast paced, and I think, that will probably continue into me getting back to Washington, but really taking that perspective back. There's, we always say at USAGov how important it is when we go to conferences is to learn and be in touch with the people we serve. It makes a remarkable difference. I have been so amazed to see just how grateful people are that we are here. There's still a lot to do. There's a lot of things that still need to improve here in Puerto Rico in general. But people, for the most part, are very, very grateful that we're here as the federal government helping them. And, as far as my team, I really appreciate all the ideas. I would bet a lot of my ideas and strategies with the team there. We, of course, have some people from Puerto Rico on our team, which has been amazing. And, vetting those with them has been just absolutely excellent. I think they'll continue to support FEMA in whatever function in the future. Hopefully there won't be so much need in the future. Been too many disasters, but I think I will be taking a lot of the experiences that I have had in terms of how you respond to a crisis there. And I let them know that I would be presenting some of those learnings as well, because I think crisis communications is a completely different animal to any other type of communications work.
So if I wanted to start going and following some of the channels and the stuff that you are producing or your team has been producing, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, so on Facebook, it's FEMA Puerto Rico. It's a verified page. We are on, we also share a Twitter account with the region, which includes New York, New Jersey, I believe, in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, and it's FEMA Region 2. On Instagram, it's just the FEMA account. They share all types of content and topics there. And then the text messaging feature, which is if you text to 43362 Maria, you get a confirmation in both English and in Spanish. And that program is still running. They're working on changing providers, but that's also part of our communications channel, where we send all kinds of information on upcoming registration deadlines and so forth.
That is so wonderful. Thank you so much, Victoria. Victoria Wales from USAGov, out of the GSA. Thank you for joining us and talking, and I hope you have safe travels back home.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Don't hesitate to reach out. I can put you in the right contact with anyone you want to talk to about more about this.
I think there's so much to talk about in this area, and there's so much to dig up. So we'll definitely do that.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.